What is good for all of you out there that know what we do here at Defenders of the Bank? Welcome. It's the night before a match, so of course it's time for one more sleep, but this is a very different, special, guest-filled version of our one more sleep. In fact, it's more of a playoff preview MegaPod, if you will. Joining us today, very, very excited to have, of course, Luke Klipp from LGBTFC podcast and the president of Pride Republic, and Erik Hultstrom, member of 42 Originals and one of the podcast family for a very long time. You guys, welcome to a little bit of One More Sleep playoff preview edition.
What's up? It's awesome to be here.
Yeah, man, I'm psyched to be here. It's been man, October, isn't it the best time for sports? October, November, man. I'm loving it. What a great couple days we've had.
Absolutely. Look, the reason why we're going on right now is, of course, we can't compete against the blue wave juggernaut that is the Los Angeles Dodgers. Erik repping it on the top of his hat. That's pretty cool. We've got, of course, Dodger Stadium, LA Dodgers up 2-0 in an incredible World Series so far. Both 9th, 10th, sometimes innings filled with drama out there at Chavez Ravine, just a couple minutes down the road from BMO Stadium. I know you guys have been watching it. What do you guys think of the World Series so far?
I think I have watched the Freddie Freeman walk-off grand slam at least 24 times, and every time it makes the hairs on my arms stand on end. It was an incredible thing of beauty.
Amazing, right?
Yeah, both games really were full of a lot of drama and pressure. You know, it wasn't like a team just blew it out the third inning and coasted. This game looked like a coast until the last inning came, and all of a sudden, man, it got really stressful there for the last 25 minutes. And then last night was,
Cloud nine. Last night was Cloud nine.
Yeah, that's one of those. That's one of those moments it's going to live on for decades and decades, and it
Right.
becomes part of the exalted history of the franchise.
And by the way, shout out to Joe Davis for the Vin Scully homage on the "She Is Gone" call too. They played them both over the top of each other, and look, Joe Davis. I'll say this: I think he had the most difficult job potentially in the history of professional broadcasting, filling the shoes of Vin Scully as the lead broadcaster for the Dodgers. And not only has he done that, obviously, he is he's their guy on Fox for national baseball. We are lucky to have him in the LA Dodgers market. He's just an incredible one. So that was just so cool. I mean, look, I know we're not a Dodgers playoff pod. We're an LAFC playoff pod, but born and raised Angelinos, and I've got to give it up to the Dodgers because they did beat my New York Metropolitans. And if you're wondering, by the way, where's the other Mets fan on this one more sleep? Christian Philly Philemon, of course, not just of Defenders of the Bank, not just of Die Fußball Bros podcast, not just of the Empire Strikers and everything else that he does out there, calling games for UCR, calling games for FC Premier for the women's team. He's actually at the MASL Combine right now. We are expecting him to chime in live on location from the very secretive MASL Combine. So he will be joining us at some point. Don't think we forgot about Philly. But right now, Erik, Luke, and I are going to delve in to everything playoff related. We'll look back at an incredible 2024 season where, of course, LAFC took the top spot in the West on decision day. We will talk about where all three of us were when all that craziness was going on. But let's rip the Band-Aid off right away. We've got plenty of people in the chat. We've got plenty of people on Instagram, on YouTube, on Twitter, wherever you guys are digesting Defenders. Please know that we are extremely grateful. Let's rip the Band-Aid off, though. The question everybody wants to know: how much and or what are we going to see from Carlos Vela? Luke, what do you think? How much are we actually going to see our number 10 on the pitch during the playoffs?
Not much. That's my prediction. Not much. He is getting not much pay, as we just learned this past week,
Right.
to basically, hang out with the team at the Performance Center in East LA, and that's cool. That's a nice gig. He didn't travel with the team to Vancouver. We'll see. He was warming up and looked like he might be able to come into that last game against San Jose. I think if he does come in tomorrow, it's going to be 80th minute. But I don't know if there's a lot of confidence from Cherundolo in Vela's ability to change the dynamics of the game because he hasn't been in a game all season.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought too, because in terms of changing the dynamic, right? When you have dynamic players, to continue to use the same word, like a Matty Bogusz, a Kike Oliveira, a David Martinez, guys that are playing at a speed that Carlos certainly hasn't been used to playing at this season, and even towards the last couple of years, Carlos isn't playing at that type of pace. It's one thing to bring on David Martinez and Kike Oliveira and Matty Bogusz and some of these guys after teams have spent their legs, and now you're trying to defend those guys for the final 30, 40 minutes. It's another to bring on a guy who you can stay in front of, all due respect to Carlos Vela, like Olivier Giroud. We'll see what happens there with Carlos. Completely agree. Eric, what do you think? How much are we going to see of Carlos Vela in this playoff run?
Carlos Vela is going to come out in the soccer equivalent of the NFL victory formation. And that's when the quarterback comes down to kneel at the end of the game because the competitive segment is over. One of the things I can point to on this is we are all, let's face it, we're all the nerds here, like who really just dive into everything in this team. We were all looking at last offseason and looking at any glimpse of rumors for contract negotiations. And we know that he wanted a contract level that the team was unwilling to do. And when he got re-signed here at the end, he got signed for $325,000. I mean, for somebody who's going into a big negotiation and, puts his foot down, I need at least this much. And then to show up for this, to me, is really, I think it's more of a sending off. As he said before, he never really got a goodbye. And I think this is a goodbye. And when we looked at the last game, we needed those 2 points and we were chasing it, and he didn't really go in. When we needed the goals, Kamara came in and Martinez and that was that, So I don't think Vela is going to be on there as a super sub. I don't think he's coming in to score goals. I think he comes on if we get a comfortable 4-1 victory, at the 80th minute, and it's at home, so he can get a little round of applause. Like, I think that's as far as it's going to be personally.
And I should qualify this a little bit because I do think that we could see more of him after the next international break, assuming that we move on past Vancouver. There's another couple of weeks break, right? So everything kind of resets a little, and maybe there's an opportunity there for him to really work in with the first squad.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that we all kind of pointed to is the language in the contract that he signed. It's a contract through 2024 with a team option for 2025 rather than a player option. That almost told me from the jump that maybe this was Carlos getting his goodbye versus Carlos wanting to come back and make one more run at an MLS Cup, or let me stay through next year to bring my buddy Antoine over in the summer window, maybe even Paul Pogba, but I don't think that's going to happen. But it's just one of those. It was an eye-opener when you saw the language of the contract. I'll say this, though. The $325,000 for hanging out with your buddies for a couple of months isn't the worst contract in the history of the world. That's I'll take that for sure. But yeah, I will say this, though. I think the one thing we could see is if there is a time in the match where we need some set piece structure, where we need somebody to take a few corners, or where we're very clearly able to get the ball to the back line and win corner after corner after over a couple of teams. I think what we'll see is maybe Carlos comes in the 75th, 80th minute to provide that kind of corner kick set piece acumen that we know he's good for. But I have to agree with the two of you. If we see much of Carlos, it might be, what did they call Darko Milicic for the 2004 Pistons that year? The Human Victory Cigar. It's one of my favorite nicknames of all time in sports. It's weird to think that we're using Carlos as like the way we know we've salted away a match. So I agree. It's going to be interesting. I would love, by the way, for all of us to be proven wrong and Carlos comes out there and is a contributor, but I don't think anybody's expecting anything like that.
You know, if his salary, if this 325 is basically, you know, the half the season and his extension is for 650, this puts him underneath the TAM contract.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the biggest thing. What we know that John Thorrington and everybody in the front office is so good at is managing salaries. You know, I think we can look at a couple of contracts that haven't gone so well, but not because a lot of these players are making way too much money, just because their play on the field just hasn't been good for the club. A Pancho Ginella comes to mind, a Mario Gonzalez comes to mind, but they've got a lot more hits than they do misses there. Let me ask you guys one other question that wasn't on the rundown, but since we're talking about it, we might as well. Do we see more of Kai Kamara or more of Olivier Giroud in the playoffs? What do you guys think? Luke, what do you think?
Oh, you're calling up me first. No fair.
I mean, Eric can go first if you want. He's got the Dodger color hat on.
I would love to see – sorry, y'all. I would love to see more of Kai. But here's the thing. Here's the thing about this. Kai looks best when he gets subbed in the second half because he comes in and he brings a new energy. When he has started with the team, it feels different. Olivier provides, I think, a stronger center forward position, even if he's not as electric as Kai can be toward the end of a game when he's subbed in. Olivier is really great at getting those long balls and knocking them back to play other players to set them up for goals or getting into the final third. So I don't know. I think we'll see more of Olivier than we see of Kai, but I don't really hate that, even though I am enjoying Kai's play more in the position than Olivier.
Yeah, like it. Yeah, I agree. Right? It's kind of Eric. I would imagine it comes down to: are we trying to make the hold up play and play through the middle through a guy like Olivier, or are we trying to just go with gas? And usually it's not just Kai, right? It's David Martinez or it's Kike Oliveira or somebody else subbing on with him. What do you think, Eric?
I mean, Giroud to me still just doesn't look like he fits in. I think Giroud will start through these finals. But if you ask the question, should he start through the finals? I think that's where I wouldn't necessarily put him up there. You know, we can't forget he is the highest paid player in the team. He's the biggest name, and there's a certain marketing aspect that comes to it. You know, I mean, it's sports and it's entertainment at the same time, and we know he brings people in. But I still think the best we've seen LAFC is with Bogusz and the false nine. You look at how Dolo really likes to play, and he likes to play the counter press, and he likes to play the transition and the counter attack. And Giroud's off the ball work rate has improved a bit since he got here. His off the ball work rate, his first bunch of games was just absolute garbage in my opinion. And his hold up play is nice, but we've never, our offensive structures has never really relied around hold up play on a nine to progress the ball. Right. And a lot of times on the counterattacks, he looks like he just can't keep up with the break, and we end up with one guy short coming up there. So in a lot of ways, it just hasn't worked. But you know, at some point it will. And then there's the whole question of the midfield and the service. You know, we're playing with an inverted wingback on the left side, although we have Campos coming out now. So we're just not set up to cross a ball to a guy that has always played on teams that can cross or pass him the ball. And so I think our best play still is without Giroud. But if Giroud's going to come out for the first half, the one thing he does do well is he occupies both center backs on the other side. So he does open up a little more space, even if he's not moving into space himself as well. You know, he's making it a little easier for Bouanga. So, you know, it's going to be interesting, but I think we're going to continue with him. I think he's slowly going to improve with the team, but it's a little bit of a liability.
And maybe another reason why we might see a little more Carlos Vela to get a little better service into Olivier Giroud. Who knows? No, I think the biggest thing for me, and this is, I'm shocked that I have to say this about Olivier Giroud, is just stay on side, man. Just stay on side. And when you know you're offside, when you know you're offside, get back onside. That's all. That's all I'm asking for Olivier. We've had at least 3 goals called back from Olivier Giroud being offside. And countless number of attacks we have not been able to make through the middle because and I'm shocked because some of these offside, if he's coming over to MLS after playing in the places that he has played, MLS is a slower game than a lot of the places that he has played. I know that maybe he's getting a little bit older and he's slowing down, but I have to imagine this is not an issue for Olivier Giroud. He has made it an issue. All I ask, Olivier, because we know you watch all of our pods and we really do appreciate the support. All I ask is that you please stay on side, man. Give us a chance in the attack. That's all.
You know, I think he's in danger of becoming Gonzalo Higuain.
Ooh, okay.
Look, I mean,
them's fighting words.
Can you explain, by the way, to the people that listen to the pod that have no idea what you just said, like scarf?
Yeah, Gonzalo Higuain, he went to Miami. His last stint before coming there, I believe, was Real Madrid, and solid work as a 9 there. And one of his quotes when he came here is, "I thought in MLS I could play with a cigarette in my mouth," you know, and I don't know if it's just that he is underestimating the tenacity of the average MLS defender or what it is, but you know, Higuain had an extremely lackluster 2 years in MLS and he did hardly anything for Miami. He had a good last like 5 or 6 games, and
I remember him picking it up right at the end, right?
Right at the end, like in 2 years, right? Like the last probably month or two, and then that's it. And you know, that was that. And he's kind of just a speed bump on the radar, like Steven Gerrard is another one that was just bombed in our league.
Oh, yeah.
Ashley Cole bombed in our league.
I think Frank Lampard would be another one. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, and this is the thing. Giroud can be one of those guys. He really, I think he needs to figure it out. And that's it.
I do have one little pushback on this, though, because Giroud has scored 2 goals for us.
Yes.
Leagues Cup final and Open Cup final. And I remember us having this whole conversation about Gareth Bale a couple years ago. He's not fitting into the team. What's his role? There was like think pieces about all this. What we're paying him all this money. He's not doing anything. What's going on? And then we all know what happened in the MLS Cup final. So I think we all just kind of have to take a deep breath, recognize that the talent and the skill is there, and eventually he'll figure out how to stay on side.
I will say Gareth Bale was nursing that back injury for most of the time that he was here. However, Luke, if you're saying that means that now we're going to get Olivier scoring in a third final for us, I'm in. I'll take. Look, we all can agree. If only Gareth Bale, if only that one moment happens with Gareth Bale, he's a legend. If only that one moment will happen with Olivier Giroud, he's a legend for LAFC. Let's make it happen. Absolutely.
Yeah, you know, and another thing that I've been saying for quite a while in this is that, you know, the team's not built for a guy like Giroud. So that's in some ways I give a lot of slack. I think 2025 is going to be the year that Giroud really comes on. And I think some pieces will come in the offseason that will complement him much better than what we have now. So, you know, that's kind of my grain of salt. So when I'm like, sometimes I think our best 11 doesn't have him on the pitch. It's really more because of how they play versus him as a player. And I think a lot of it, he's a square peg in a round hole right now.
Yeah. I got one other question for you that's real quick. A little rapid fire for you guys. All right. Either both or name the one or neither. Who will be back next year? Matty Bogusz, Kike Oliveira, or nobody?
I think they're both going to be here next year, which is, I guess, D, all of the above. I don't think either of them are going to move.
Interesting. Okay. Your thoughts on that one, Luke?
I think they're both gone.
I agree with Luke on this one. I think the verbiage that Kike used about wanting to be gone, and I think what we've seen from Matty over these last 6 months or so, he's going to deserve to go somewhere. It'll be interesting, right? Because what John Thorrington has always said, what the club has always done, is tried to act in the best interest of our players. And I think those two, they're certainly on the radar everywhere. I do think, though, that if you look at Diego Rossi's situation, Edward Atuesta's situation, and Eric, you were telling us off air as we were talking about Chiqui Palacios' situation, which I actually want you to talk about in just a second. But if you look at how poorly those moves have gone for those players once they left, maybe John Thorrington has a little bit more pull to say, why don't you let us figure out where the best place is rather than maybe you forcing your way out? But Erik, real quick, I know we're kind of veering off track just a little bit. Would you mind?
No, I'm loving this. I'm loving this. I have so much to say.
Would you mind just talking real quick about, because I didn't know this until you mentioned it, what happened with Cheeky Palacios this season?
Yeah. So Palacios went to Corinthians, and for those who don't know me really well, I do watch a ton of Brasileiro. Like, I like MLS and Brasileiro, and I obsess on both the leagues. Palacios went to Corinthians in the offseason and practiced there. Brasileiro, their season starts for the first 2 months. It's called the state championships. You know, there's the Paulistão, where everybody in the Sao Paulo state plays. There's a Carioca, everybody in the Rio state plays. There's also one down south. Every state has where all the teams play. He got injured 15 minutes into the very first game, which would have been late January, with a knee injury. Came off. They said it was a minor injury, but he needed minor surgery. So he got surgery. Probably about 5-6 weeks later, he starts training a little bit, trains for 2 or 3 weeks, and then something went wrong with it, and he needed another cleanup surgery. And he's just disappeared. He's played 15 minutes this season, the first game in January, and he hasn't been seen since. I think he's starting to train again with the club, but to me, it kind of, the first thing it reminds me of is Eddie Segura's knee injury that kind of turned into a whole 2.5-year ordeal. And it just sucks. That's the luck of the draw sometimes. But so that's what's happened to Palacios. He hasn't done much with that. And if I can circle back a tiny bit with the Bogusz and Oliveira as well, some of the things I think, Bogusz, I think he's going to be a summer transfer. I don't think he's going to be a winter transfer. A lot of times teams in the winter, they want to shore something up for an attack. And I think Bogusz, coming from MLS, is a guy that's going to need an offseason with the team to really have a chance to succeed. I don't see him as being like a winter transfer window like push. Oliveira, I love how he's been playing kind of a right midfielder, right wing back role. And part of that with that, you know, he said he wanted to go, but both of his stints with the Uruguay national team were absolutely terrible. A lot of criticism from Uruguay fans. They're like, we don't want to see him there. That has to have hurt his trade stock right there when you get on the bigger stage, and he kind of didn't do much. Never mind, he was playing as a 9, which I think is unfair also, but he's been moving more to a wing back. And I see him coming into this role, and I think they're going to kind of reimagine him. And with the rise of Martinez at right wing, you know, to have them both in the field. So I think he's going to go more back to a wing back, which is what he played early at when he was like around Penarol and in the Uruguayan league.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm convinced.
David Martinez, you know, he plays less and less like a 19-year-old every time he gets back out there. You know, he's really making some great decisions. You forget how young this kid really is. He's actually pretty big too for a winger, especially in MLS. He's been a revelation. All right, I'm gonna pop us back on track for a little bit so that we can take a look back at the 2024 season. Let's talk as we head into the playoffs. We had to get there somehow, and somehow we did. It wasn't by the skin of our teeth. It was actually as the top seed in the Western Conference yet another time for LAFC. And this one probably felt a little bit sweeter than any of the others that we've had. Obvious reasons aside, how we got there was a lot of fun and a lot of consternation at times this season, a bit of a roller coaster ride. So I asked the two of you, and I'll start with Luke because I think you were most excited about this question when we were talking about it in the rundown. Your most memorable moment or moments over the course of the 2024 regular season.
I love it. I have a few, but I do, and I hope that we will get to that last game. I was reminded of the thought that I had a couple years ago when in our 2022 season, where it was like literally every single goal that we had this season made the difference. And that is exactly what happened this season. So everyone remembers, I think, that we started off pretty poorly, right? We did not have a good start to this season. But for Pride Republic, for our LGBTQ supporters group, we finally had a home bar to watch all the games together. And that's been a big special thing for me. But it started terribly. It was like, oh my gosh, every time we're gathering to watch a game at this bar, the folks at the bar must have been like, wow, these people, they don't know what they're doing. Like they're masochists wanting to cheer for this team that like we were up on Colorado and then lost. So we had no game at Real Salt Lake that was like 3 hours delayed. There was the game that was supposed to be at Houston that didn't even happen. I mean, there have been so many just sort of rough moments, but I have a couple really special moments, I think, that will just sort of forever live with me. A couple of them are kind of random, but one, that 3-2 win over Portland early in the season, folks may remember we went up 2-0 early, and Portland were not a good team, as we saw again this last week. But they came back with two kind of funky goals, of weird deflection. We were all down on Hugo Lloris because we're like, why didn't he go for that and stop that goal? And then Denny Bouanga in stoppage puts us back up 3-2. We all lose our shit. It's a great win for us, over a poor Portland team. We're like, we should have had that one in the bag, but it was still one of these moments early on in the season that kind of helped define what would come to later on in the season. That 0-2 win at St. Louis, where they had been really solid at home. We didn't know that St. Louis were going to end up being a crap team by the end of this year. At that point, they were pretty decent, and they were the number one seed from the prior year, right? Like they had won the Western Conference the year prior, even if they shat the bed in the playoffs. So we had every reason to believe that was going to be a really tough game. And I still can see Denny Bouanga getting that feed and like running alone on goal and getting the second goal to salt that one away in like the 80-something minute. The 0-1 win in Atlanta, I remember walking home from that one and thinking that felt like a draw, but people were like, no, but that was actually a win. Like it was a win, and it was a good win, as rough as it felt in the moment, because we were just sort of starting to come out of that rough period in March and April. That 0-1 win in Atlanta that actually helped really kind of set us on a course where we had a number of games where we didn't give up goals, where we were winning game after game after game, and that was one of them. But the one I will throw out there as the one that will live in memory for me for a long time is that Rose Bowl game, because that game sucked last year. It sucked so bad, and it very nearly did again this year, except for them not being able to shoot on goal just minutes after they got one back and just missing. And then we held on, and it was just like this incredible moment of, we came to your place, we made you look stupid once again, here we go.
And I think going back to that Atlanta 1-0 victory and then the Rose Bowl victory, LAFC had won something like one match in their last 13 or 14 in what we would call NFL-sized stadiums. We just hadn't played well in a large stadium in 4 years, essentially. And getting those back-to-back, winning in Atlanta, obviously Atlanta had been a house of horrors for us before then. And you mentioned what the Rose Bowl meant to us last season. That was a brutal match to be there for. Winning those two matches in the fashion that we did, really having to grind out both of those victories for sure. I thought that also just kind of put us on a little bit of a different mindset to the way we play in these big atmospheres. And who knows, it might be something that we see in the playoffs down the road. Who knows, maybe the people at Inter Miami, if they make it all the way, there's no way they're playing in that little tinderbox that Inter Miami plays in for a final. They got to move that somewhere. So maybe those big stadium wins come in handy for us. Erik, out of all the moments this season, there were certainly a lot of great ones. What are your most memorable?
Let's see. Yeah. I mean, it gets tough. Oh, isn't that a great answer? Okay, let's move on. No. So I kind of got to go to the very beginning. Wife and I, we went to the Coachella Valley Invitational, and I didn't go to it the year before. And I will say that was one of the most fun times I've had watching. And also because it was like 2 months into the off season. So it was kind of like methadone for the fix. And I just had such a great weekend at Coachella that was my first highlight. And then kind of seeing the guys start to gel together, the close up, you can listen to Lloris barking at them as he's trying to know the team. Campos got his first assist, Kike Oliver a header. That was great. And then, as Luke said earlier, we had the slowest start in LAFC club history this year. And, the guys tried to figure out how to win and eventually did. I think the Orlando road win was one that was 3 points that I didn't think was coming. And I thought that was a really solid one. The Cincinnati road win as well. That was another one that I don't think any of us really expected them to win, and they just went and handled it. Ugly wins both, but wins nonetheless. Of course, there's the Open Cup win. That was fantastic. A lot of fun to be at. Having a final on a Wednesday night is a little crazy because they had the full productions and everything, but really, really fun. But I will say that the best feeling I've had, even better than the Open Cup victory, was the last game where we clinched the first. And I just, the energy in the stadium exceeded winning the Open Cup trophy. And so to me, it's like we're riding that energy now into tomorrow. So I'm hoping that tomorrow we can just keep that up and keep these good vibes rolling.
Yeah, in case you missed the first part of what we're talking about, we're putting aside that moment, right? That we'll talk about in just a second when we found out we won the top, or we earned the top seed in the Western Conference. I've got to say, for me, you talk about most memorable moments. Look, I was the one. It's my fault. The reason why our win streak got broken in Austin 1-1, I was there for that match. So, of course, unfortunately, we don't win that one. That was the only draw in that large unbeaten streak that we went off on. I have to say, one of my favorite moments, maybe in the history of this club, is as we were playing in Tukwila and the train whistle going off in the background as we're in stoppage time for this match. I just thought, Hugo Lloris has played in some of the most hallowed grounds of football around the world, and now he's playing amidst a backdrop of pine trees in Tukwila, Washington, as a train goes careening by less than 25 yards from where he's standing. It may have been my favorite moment of the season, to train whistle, to end all train whistles. But, for me, I am the staunch flag bearer for the U.S. Open Cup on our podcast. Philly came around. It was so great to see him at the end of the season. He was as excited as I was. But to have won the U.S. Open Cup, a cup that I respect so much because of the chaos that could be a U.S. Open Cup. I mean, I never thought we'd get scored on by Las Vegas Lights or New Mexico United, but we did, and it was kind of a wake-up call both times that it happened. I mean, we've spent some great nights at what was Bank of California Stadium, now BMO, playing against guys like Sacramento Republic and San Diego Loyal. And I mean, that's what American soccer football should be all about. And the fact that so many of these clubs keep going by the wayside, and we don't get to talk about the Loyal anymore. We don't get to talk about, what was the other one? FC Tucson or a couple of the others, Reno 1868 or whatever it was, where Danny Musovski came from. These clubs should be supported and loved. So I think, other than, in my opinion, the moment that we'll talk about right now was the best moment of the season, because it came after all the matches had been played for LAFC this season. For me, it was the U.S. Open Cup. But let's talk about it. Where were you, and how did you feel? What did you do when we won? I guess we didn't win anything, right? We just earned the top seed. And it feels like, yeah, we won the West. No, that's not how it works in MLS, guys. Sorry. Luke, where were you when LAFC clinched the top seed in the Western Conference for the MLS Cup playoffs?
So I was in the stadium, as I think a number of folks still were.
Yep.
And when our game ended, everyone started going to their phones, right? And so we were going on a phone, and some friends of ours who were watching from home said, oh no. They started and we're like, what's going on? And they said, Galaxy are going to get a penalty. And I was like, oh man. So then we're like, okay, well, maybe they'll miss it. And then they didn't. So we're like, well, you know what? All right. We had a great time tonight. I'm hoarse from cheering my head off and booing at the sideline ref that's right in front of me, who was making some terrible, I'm ready to go home. And so we just start walking, right? So and we have a decent walk through the stadium before we exit. And we're, just making our way through the stadium, and all of a sudden we hear this cheering, right? And we're like, well, why are people cheering? And then it's getting louder and louder and louder. I'm like, wait a minute, wait a minute. And I had been looking at my phone and refreshing and like, what minute is this in? Like 90 plus 10? Like, what's going on? And then my phone updated. I was like, holy shit. It was incredible. And we were at that point, we were right along sort of side the 3252 behind like section 134 or something. And people are just losing it. We're cheering, we're jumping up and down. We're watching 3252, cheering. Everyone's just like having a raucous moment. I went back and watched it on the Apple TV, whatever. That does not capture what that moment felt like in the stadium, because they're just showing a couple people who are really, really excited. You had this, it was as loud almost as when we scored a goal, minus any music, right? Because they were done. But it was so special and so incredible. It was one of these things that you don't really ever get to experience like that, where the game is done, but you're actually so excited in the moment with something that had just happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Erik, what about you? Where were you during that?
So that game, I usually have my season tickets kind of on near the southwest end, but the guy who's been behind me for 7 years had friends come into town, was like, hey, can I buy your tickets off you so my friends can come sit here? And when he can't make it, he'll give me his tickets, and usually I'll give him to other LAFC fans. So I'm like, nah, just have them. And wife and I, we usually like to watch a couple games in the 3252. So we went and got supporter section tickets. So we spent that whole game in the supporter section, and that's where we were. The game ended. We were all looking at our phones, and I was like, oh, it's a penalty. We all saw the penalty. And and then a couple minutes later, like from the death, all of a sudden Steres puts it in, and we all become Houston fans. And the whole place went crazy. And, maybe that's why it was some of the best vibes for me I've had of any game all year, is because I spend it with the supporters. And, any game within the supporter section is always special, especially on a big win like that. It's the one place you want to be in the stadium, like soaked with beer and like happy as fuck.
And the thing about what happened in the North End as the result was being broadcast on Apple TV is that the TVs were on in the bar right behind the North End. And the TVs in the North End were like 10 seconds ahead of the phone feeds. So what we heard was this like mini roar first. And I look over at 3252 and nobody in the stands has reacted yet, but I can kind of see through the little area in the bar, and they're all jumping up and down. So we all look back at our phones. And of course, that's when the pride of Burbank, California himself, former Galaxy legend Daniel Steres, does the Galaxy in for the top spot. That was the coolest part, is how many waves of realization went around BMO at that point. It was, I've never experienced anything like that in the course of my fandom of any of the clubs that I have always supported. As a Mets fan, that just doesn't happen, and certainly Lakers fans. Look, we don't have a lot to complain about being a Lakers fan. We got a lot of championships, a lot of superstars. Usually there's not a lot of drama going into something like that. This was absolutely incredible. All right, let's talk about real quick. Couple more questions.
I want to hold something on this, though, because you pointed out that we didn't win the West. We are the number one seed in the West. I actually think because of us being number one seed in the West, we have a tougher run than if we had been second, because I think Galaxy are going to have an easier run against Colorado. And then if they play RSL, I think that's an easier one than us playing either Minnesota or Houston or Seattle. Like I think we have got a tougher run. However, it does mean that if it's us versus Galaxy, it's at our home.
Yes.
So, tougher run to get there, but I think for that particular outcome, more than worth it.
Yeah, and I'm hoping Chicho Arango has something to say about Carson making it out of there so they get to play us. Let's talk about, and there are, a bunch of names that come to mind, but the best new LAFC player, as in acquired in 2024, we got a lot of names that we can choose from. I want to know who you guys think was the best, is a tough one, but let's say most impactful player who we signed at some point in 2024. Let's see. I'm going to call on Erik. Let's go on Erik
Yeah.
to start this one.
To me, the most obvious answer is going to be Hugo Lloris. I think Hugo Lloris has had a fantastic year in goal, and part of, I think, the beginning, what ended the slide of the first 10 games of the season where we did bad was Hugo finally working together in the back line, gelling with each other, and starting to really work as a team, as opposed to like trying to figure out what everybody was doing it. Because I think a lot of our early goals just came from miscommunications, and they got all that tightened up. But I also want to say it's David Martinez. David Martinez finished the regular season with 0.81 goals per 90. He only played 470 minutes,
Right.
but he got 4 goals in that amount of time. And that is enough to tie him with Cucho Hernandez as far as like goals per 90, which at third place from the top of the league. The minimum is 1,500 to get there. He's a third of the way. But I think David Martinez has the highest ceiling of anybody I've seen at LAFC since Brian Rodriguez, whose ceiling wasn't as high as I thought it was. But I think the sky's the limit. He's so composed at such a young age, and he's fearless. He'll go right at defenders. His passing vision is excellent, and I just think this kid has so much of a future ahead of him. So he's my guy.
Yeah, they call him Venezuela's maybe best prospect ever in terms of what he could do on the world stage. So I'll take that for sure. Luke, I don't know. He kind of took 2 in Lloris and David Martinez. So by those rules, you feel free, take 2 if you'd like.
Well, before I do, I just want to shout out Erica. It was great to celebrate with her at the end of that game. We were standing next to each other when all of the screaming was going on, when we found out that we were the number 1 seed. So great to see you here tonight, Erica. Yeah, I was actually not even going to say those 2, but those are obviously great choices. I was going to say Maxime Chanot. And the reason for that is this is a guy who, frankly, I think when we got him, I don't think a lot of people were going to expect him to do much. Like, we kind of had a pretty solid back line, right? And that man has come in because we lost Jesus Murillo, and also, by the way, we no longer had Chiellini, right? Let's not forget, like, we had a stellar backline defender. And so Chanot comes in, and he has been, honestly, I think, lights out for us on that back line. There's been a few moments where it's been like, there's some questionable choices here and there. But for the defense that we've had, he and Lloris and Long have really clicked in a way that, frankly, we're seeing less and less of the like rotation of who's going to be in the back there.
Yeah.
And Chanot, I think, is the one really holding that down.
All right. I like it because you guys opened it up for me, and I get to take the guy I was going to take in the first place. I think a player who has impacted our club almost as much as any other player, and it's hard to argue. I mean, Lloris sets the shutouts in a single season record for LAFC, and he's already up to number 2 all time for our club. It's hard to argue. I mean, look, if I could be shameless and plug this for a moment, we on this podcast do love our defenders of the bank. So believe me, Maxime Chanot, if Chris Lafferty was here right now, instead, I think he's crying somewhere because the Yankees lost. But if Lafferty was in our chat, he is driving the Chanot choo-choo for sure. But I'm going with Lewis O'Brien because I love what Lewis O'Brien has brought to the club. I kind of want to print a T-shirt that just says Atuesta who, because I think Lewis O'Brien has solidified the fact that Palmeiras will be receiving Edward Atuesta back at the end of December when his loan with LAFC is up. I know that we need to somehow replace a Matty Bogusz-sized hole in the midfield, but I really do believe that Lewis O'Brien is the player we thought we were getting with Edward Atuesta, and I think it has been a massive upgrade for us in the midfield. Timothy Tillman looks like a better player when we have Lewis O'Brien alongside of him. Obviously, Ilie Sanchez and the rest of our midfield. he provided that pace that we just seem to be lacking at so many points during the regular season. And then he came over, and unreal what he has brought to this team in such a short amount of time. I believe, and Erik, you might know this more, that is his contract is still on loan, right, from Nottingham Forest. We got to get this guy locked up. We got to get him in black and gold.
I think O'Brien is. Yeah, I think he's on loan. I'm not sure a ton. I'm just, I'm like the Atuesta super fan. So like, I'm just like nails in a chalkboard, and I'm on an island I'm telling you, like, Atuesta, that guy, like, man, he's gonna show everybody what's up. And I think he did the second half. The Atuesta O'Brien was great. I also think that, Atuesta is a possession player, and the thing he does is progressive passing and shot creating chances. And his shot creating chances that he creates is 97th percentile of the league, all the way at the top. His progressive passing is 96% in the league. And if we're going to play more of a possession passing game, he's going to be pretty critical to that. But O'Brien's fantastic, but I get triggered on Atuesta slander. Since I'm not here much, you guys aren't as familiar with that. But don't slander my goat, you guys. But,
that's some serious stats you just rolled off there about Atuesta.
No, it is. And I honestly, it just has me my bias, but I just don't see this horrible player that shouldn't be here. My biggest fear is that he goes to Colorado Rapids and goes with Rafael Navarro and Mihailovic. Like, that team will be an absolute beast. Like, the things he does, he has a set of skills that nobody else on our team has. It's just, his role is complicated, and he kind of has to walk the knife's edge, and any little mistakes he makes turn into huge problems. And so, but nobody else kind of is asked to take that load on. And but that's what I think. I love the second half of him and O'Brien. I thought was fantastic.
You, by the way, mentioned Colorado Rapids. You have the game on. Can we get an update? What's happening in the land of Rapids?
It's 1-0 Carson. Joveljic scored in the 32nd minute. They're just about to kick off the second half.
Okay. All right. Thank you for the update.
But Mihailovic is injured with a really badly sprained ankle, so that's a huge loss for Colorado.
And by the way, just so that you all know out there listening, I knew what I was getting into bringing up Atuesta to Erik like that on this pod. I know he defends his boys very staunchly. And look, I do still love Edward Atuesta. And certainly when he came on to close out that match, he looked like the Edward Atuesta of old. And I would love to make it as difficult on Steve Cherundolo and John Thorrington and whoever else to put the lineups together to keep the salary cap, what it is. But I love me some Lewis O'Brien. Real quick, I don't know, are we missing anyone from 2023 at all? Any of the players who left? Is there somebody that you'd like? Hey, maybe we can just bring them back for the playoffs. Something.
Come on, JR. Your guy Giorgio Chiellini. Come on now.
That's the only right answer, right? That's it. We can just have Giorgio in the back line. We're good. Look, he's you don't want to get me started on Giorgio, because we'll go an hour and no one else will get a word in if I just start talking about my boy. But we all feel the same way. Luke, you're absolutely right. Is there anybody else that, with Omar Campos and Sergi Palencia playing as well as they had, I think it's oddly enough rendered the Chiqui Palacios move, kind of inconsequential at this point. Cifuentes and a couple. I don't know who is there anybody.
Cifuentes he bombed at Rangers, and then he went to a team in Brazil also. I think he went to like Botafogo, and just he can't see the field there either. But Campos is one. I think we're going to see the best out of him. Campos reminds me of when Palacios came here, because if we remembered Palacios, he didn't take that job from Jordan Harvey right away. Like, Jordan Harvey came on an extra year, and it took Palacios almost 3/4 of a year to finally take that starting left back from Jordan Harvey. And so I almost think it's the same. I feel like Campos is starting to like take that left back spot. And also, I also think he's the best crosser we have in the team. And moving forward with Giroud, he's going to become critical in that lineup. So, that's kind of with Campos. That's what I like to see about him.
Yeah, by the way, since going to Rangers, he's been at Cruzeiro for a little bit. He's now at
Cruzeiro,
Aris.
that's what it was. Sorry.
He's at Aris Saloniki in Greece right now. He got transferred back from Cruzeiro to Rangers, and Rangers had him transferred over to Aris Saloniki. And again, you're right. It's been rough. He did score this season in the Greek Super League, so maybe they're using him a little bit more offensively. But yeah, it's. I would agree. I mean, look, I would love to have Maxime as a backup keeper right now because I don't think I love our backup keeper situation. But I don't think we'll need a backup keeper situation, hopefully in the playoffs. So there's that. Luke, is there anybody else other than your incredibly correct and astute answer of Giorgio Chiellini?
I mean, look, I actually was one of those strange people who got a Kellen Acosta jersey. I was very excited for Kellen when we got him. I liked him. I was one of those few people who actually genuinely liked seeing the guy out on the pitch. I thought he was a really genuinely good person off the pitch. You know, seeing him leave was a tough one for me. But I think you're pointing out Lewis O'Brien. He's been really solid back in mid, and having Atuesta back with the team. We haven't necessarily missed Kellen, but I definitely enjoyed having him in the squad and was sad to see him go in the off season.
Yeah, he's another player that off the pitch, he provides you so much more than even what he provides on the pitch, even though he's very, very, very good. All right. Last question before we get into Vancouver. And we've talked for 51 minutes already and haven't talked a word about Vancouver. We know the big names for LAFC, obviously, Denis Bouanga and Matty Bogusz, and, you know, what we need from Hugo Lloris and everything. Who is the X factor for LAFC in the playoffs? Meaning, who's the player that maybe will get the biggest contribution from, whether it's on the score sheet or a different type of stat line? Who's going to be that player that we look back at the LAFC playoffs and go, wow, this wouldn't have been the same without that player? Eric, what do you think?
I think if I'm going to pick like who's our star, I think David Martinez is going to be the guy he's going to step up, and we're going to see what the future looks like, and the future is now.
I love it. Luke?
I'm going to go with a guy we were just talking a fair amount about. I think it's going to be Omar Campos. I think we're going to see some cheeky style passing from him that is going to start to set up folks like Olivier Giroud, like Denis Bouanga, and maybe even a Carlos Vela, Matty Bogusz. I think he's going to be really solid for us in his role.
Yeah, you know, I'll be honest. I wanted to say Sergi Palencia, but people are talking about some Defender of the Year votes in MLS for Sergi Palencia. So I don't know if that's an X factor. So I thought about this long and hard before we even went on and before I said what I said. And so I mean this, and this is me going from full heel to hopefully full baby face on this one. I think it's going to be Edward Atuesta. I think we are going to see the Edward Atuesta of old come back in the playoffs. And I only think that because of the way he played in those limited minutes in our last game. And I thought, this is, he's back. He's here. This is the Edward Atuesta. So maybe they've just been working with him a little bit on some attitude adjustments, on some playmaking adjustments. I can't wait to see what we get from Edward Atuesta. I don't know how much he plays in this system with however it is that Steve is going to be rolling guys out, because I don't know, do you start him over Timothy Tillman or Ilie or Matty or Lewis O'Brien or however it is we configure our midfield? But I can't believe I'm saying this, and I really wish Philly were here because he would be calling all kinds of shenanigans on me for the smack that I have talked all season on Edward Atuesta, but I really do believe he is going to be our X factor in the playoffs.
You know, another thing I want to bring up on this as well, not involving Atuesta at all, completely separate subject, is Marlon. You know, he's a guy that came in because Aaron Long went out of the game. I don't know if it's just a small strain and Long's been back after some rest, but I do think Vancouver, especially with how Brian White's been playing, is a team that we probably want to go 3 center backs with. And so if Long's out and Murillo's out, all of a sudden we're down to, Chanot, Palencia, and maybe they throw in Marlon as the third guy. He kind of came in and played hero ball for us. And he's a guy, if Long is down for any more amount of time, he's a guy that's going to have to come in and he's going to have to be strong on that back line. So, this playoff could be a story of him as well coming up a hero.
I would love for that to be the case. By the way, I know you just saw it, probably Eric as well, but we're now at 2-0 right now for Carson. So
whatever. This isn't their show.
This is not their show. All right. 13 wins, 13 losses, 8 draws in the regular season. And no, we're not just talking about Vancouver's record against LAFC this year. That's their record for all of the MLS regular season. 8th place with 47 points, a +3 goal differential after scoring 52 and giving up 49, just in case you want to know how that falls. 8th most goals in the West, tied for 6th fewest goals allowed, so squarely in the middle of the Western Conference. At a club that, by the way, has only played 1 fewer match overall this season than LAFC. I guess we need to put some respect on the name of the Canadian Championship as they went through the gauntlet of Cavalry FC, Pacific FC, and then 1 single match against Toronto FC. And they couldn't beat the Italians or the dysfunctional Bob Bradley family out there. So they win the Canadian Championship. They lose in the first round of the CONCACAF Champions Cup because they were the Canadian champions last year. They keep getting to play in this thing to Tigres by going 0-1-1 against them. And in Leagues Cup, they won their first 2 matches, but then get eliminated by Pumas. So they actually played 45 matches on the season. LAFC has played 46. So maybe a little bit more football in Vancouver than one might think. But that being said, the storyline going into MLS Cup playoffs was that motocross was pushing the Vancouver Whitecaps from their home at BC Place to a different carpet down the road in Portland, where they had to play at Providence Park in front of the vaunted Timbers Army. And all they did in that match on the road in a one-off must-win in a hostile environment is take Portland behind the Timbers woodshed and absolutely beat the pants off of them 5-0, which we all agreed could have been 7 or 8-0 in a surprisingly one-sided affair. Let's talk about the Vancouver Whitecaps. All right. First and foremost, LAFC had played them 3 times in the regular season, or 3 times overall, I guess, this season before the playoffs. The 3-0 win at BMO Stadium was just continued the 3-0 trend from last year in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, where we had back-to-back 3-0 victories, a Kike Oliveira brace, a Matty Bogusz goal, and that was, by the way, without Ryan Hollingshead and pre-Olivier Giroud. Fast forward to July 30th, a 2-2 draw at BMO in Leagues Cup that was the weirdest draw and then lost sort of that I think we had on the season, right? We're down 2-0 for 87 minutes, and then Kai Kamara scores and Matty Bogusz at the death, and then it's Kai Kamara and Matty Bogusz missing the PKs so that Vancouver is the one that wins, quote-unquote, that match in Leagues Cup. All we needed was a point to advance, so I don't know how much we were affected by that. And then that 2-1 win at BC Place just 13 days ago, where Matty gets one at the start and Ilie gets one at the death. But really, Vancouver should have had maybe 3 or 4 or 5 in that one. So I ask all of you, the both of you, is there something to make of Vancouver's ability to force LAFC to kind of play their style over the last 2 matches that we've played Vancouver? What do we think, Luke? What do you think?
I'm going to give this one first to Eric because I'm not the expert here.
I'm going to say no. I think we should handle this in 2 matches. I think we beat ourselves is the only way that we don't beat Vancouver. Nickelback superfan Sartini is a pretty competent manager, but our talent level is just much more, I think. the trip to BC Place is a tough one to evaluate because we had international guys out. They were missing 6 people on international duty. They also have Ryan Gauld coming back from injury, which he came out and Storm last game. He wasn't there when we played it. Gauld and White, that tandem, that's the one that can hurt us. And that's why I think we dropped the 3 center backs. And I think we're going to do pretty well neutralizing Brian White because there's just Vancouver's one of those teams that Cherundolo, the way he plays, just really, he's kind of their kryptonite, not to a level that Seattle is. I think that's the most obvious, but it's not that far off. So if we play a good, clean game, we don't make our mistakes, I think we're going to handle them at home, and then we're going to head up there. We're going to handle them in their house as well, and we're going to have a little extra rest until we see who wins between Seattle and Houston. So I'm pretty confident about this game. The boys are going to need to work because it's a motivated team. You got to watch out for Swaggy T, Tristan Blackman, who he's always been a guy I like. And, I think trying to limit their set pieces is really that's going to be it. I think Vancouver is dangerous on set pieces, and that's what we got to look out for. But otherwise, we should handle it.
Luke?
Yeah, look, last year when we had to do this with Vancouver in the first round, best of 3, I was telling folks I'm really nervous about this. And we had beat them so many times, except for like when we played them at home during the Pride game in June of last year, where they beat us 3-2. So, the evidence was there to show that we knew how to take care of them. So I feel badly even suggesting this, but I don't think we finish it in 2. I think we're going to go to 3 on this. I think Ryan Gauld, Brian White, they're going to be tough up front for us to neutralize. I appreciate Erik's analysis of that, and I certainly hope that that's what we see out there on the pitch tomorrow and going forward. But I know they looked the part against Portland, and I think they're very, very hungry and ready to show that they can take us on after we knocked them out of the playoffs last year, after we knocked them out of Leagues Cup, or excuse me, CONCACAF Cup earlier last year. I mean, they've seen us enough times that I think they're very hungry. Now, that doesn't mean we're not hungry. I think we're also very, very hungry. And I think our team are gelling at exactly the right time. So to me, that's the X factor that gives us the edge in this series. But I still think, they're also seeing some strength coming to play right at the last minute. And that's going to make them a very tough out.
Yeah, to quote the SNL skit, The Californians, Stewart, I think Stewart is going to be a really big problem for LAFC. We've talked about, obviously, their 2 biggest guys up top, but I think who we're not talking about, other than Ryan Gauld and Brian White, is Stuart Armstrong. And this kid, he's like 30 years old. He came in to the club not too long ago on a transfer from Southampton, formerly of Celtic as well. He is a midfielder who, by the way, scored 6 goals and had 7 assists in the English Championship this year. And in that last playoff game, in the 5-0 drubbing of Portland, had a goal and 2 assists. He has represented Scotland over 50 times on the national team, and a player who I think has given them a little bit more of dynamism in the midfield. And maybe, look, if you're trying to keep Ryan Gauld is a special player in Major League Soccer, 15 goals, 14 assists on the season. And we know Brian White is their straight line goal scorer with 16 on the season. They've got a lot of other veteran pieces that don't do anything for me at all. I'm sorry. I don't fear Ryan Raposo or Sebastian Berhalter or any of these other guys out there. But this addition of Stuart Armstrong does provide a little bit of a wrinkle. And I think that it's going to be interesting to see how LAFC deals with that, because if you go back and look at Stuart Armstrong's MLS foray this season, the guy played in just barely 125 minutes of Major League Soccer action. Made cup of coffee appearances basically in 6 matches. But I think he's now ready to go with them. And oddly enough, they held him out in that October 13th match. He wasn't in the squad, wasn't available for selection. And yet he comes out, he plays 64 minutes in the 5-0 drubbing and looked very good in doing so. So I think we're going to see what happens with Stuart Armstrong I love what Dave Gomez says here. We need to put one in within the first 10 minutes to set the tone. If anybody out here watching Shoresy, it's all about how you set the tone. It's one of my favorite shows on television, by the way. So I totally agree. But the other thing I'm hoping for, and I'm going to be completely selfish about this one, guys, if we don't take it in 2, then LAFC is going to take more money out of all of our accounts for our season tickets for that third game. And I'm sorry, but I think a best-of-3 series to start the playoffs is the stupidest thing in Major League Soccer. At least just make it a home and home so we don't have to worry about it, but it is all about the money. And just, God, for the love of God, please take it in 2 for no other reason than I just don't want to give any more of my money than I have to for this playoff
Especially
run.
to watch us play Vancouver again.
Yes, especially to watch us play Vancouver again. You're absolutely...
I think that side with that's their left side with Armstrong and Gold.
Yeah.
I think if they go 3 center backs and they put Palencia as the right center back, they put Kike Oliveira as a wing back, and they put David Martinez up front, I think they'll have enough juice to shut both of those guys down. Especially Oliveira on a wing back. That guy just terrorizes people.
To think about, and we haven't really touched on this, but we'll touch on it real quick now. To think about, we were bemoaning the lack of depth at the start of the season, right? Going like, oh my God, we're only one center back injury or one midfield injury away from something. And now I don't know that there's a faster team in Major League Soccer if we've got David Martinez, Kike Oliveira, Sergi Palencia, Matty Bogusz, Denny Bawanga. I mean, holy hell, how are we keeping up with all? I don't think they are. I think you're absolutely right. Let's talk real quick too. You mentioned it. A player who, by the way, just made his 100th cap with Vancouver Whitecaps. He only played 79 matches with us, but he will always be one of our own. Tristan Blackman on that back line. Is there a little bit of an edge? I mean, does he care about it anymore at this point? He's played us now 57 times since he's left LAFC. Is that a storyline anymore, or are we just happy that there's a familiar face on the other side? Luke, what do you think?
So 2 things. One, he already got his goal against us the first time that he played against us. So I don't see that happening again. And the other thing, that game that I mentioned last year where they beat us, the Pride game, where we sit, he was injured that game, and he was sitting right in front of us at the field level, and he was tapping his fingers and tapping his toes to the 32-52. And I just got to say, I think he wants to be back here in LA, and I don't blame him. It's a lot of fun.
Right.
I'm not too worried about Tristan Blackman in this game.
All right. Your thoughts, Eric?
Yeah, Blackman for me is forever black and gold. He didn't celebrate his goal. If he scores a goal in the playoffs, I don't think he'll celebrate again. I wish him the best, just not so much on this next game, but I think he's a class professional.
I will say I absolutely think he will celebrate if he scores. He gave us the one, right? He did the whole all right, we're good. He'll absolutely celebrate. And I hope he does, because you know what? He's earned it. He's one of my favorite players that we've had on that back line, obviously, as a defender of the bank. He was a favorite of ours here on the podcast. But it's crazy to think he's now played 179 matches in MLS shirts, and 100 of those have been with Vancouver. The other matchup I want to talk about, obviously, 2 players that don't play against each other, but I think a place where we may have some of the biggest advantage out there on the pitch is Hugo Lloris and Yohei Takaoka. What do we think? Is there – I happen to think, and I'll ask this question in a way that doesn't involve me stopping 4 times. I happen to think that the only way that Vancouver stays in this match is if Yohei Takaoka has 3 or 4 or 5 saves that keep them in the match. Is there anything to the goalkeeper matchup in this one, or is it just something absurd that I like to look at? Eric?
I like Lloris better. Just for his distribution. I know Takaoka is a good keeper, but I think Crépeau is better than he is. I think he's a downgrade from Crépeau. I think he's a little higher rated than he should be. I don't think he's a bad keeper, but I think he's right around probably middle of the pack as far as MLS keepers. I don't think he's a top 10.
Yeah, by the way, I think James Pantemis is also a downgrade from Maxime Crépeau, but Portland didn't seem to think that over the last several matches of the season. Luke, your thoughts on the goalkeeper matchup? Is there anything there?
Every time I see Takaoka on goal, I'm like, all right, cool. I'm just not worried. I mean, there's a bunch of other keepers out in the league that I think, oh, this person could keep them in this and will keep them in this. Takaoka is not one of them. And frankly, Larice, for as much as we were feeling frustrated with him early on this season, has really come into form. His distribution is incredible. His shot stopping, I mean, he kept us in with that 87th or 88th minute toe block of the shot against San Jose at the end of that one. I mean, he has been showing us that he is here to play. He's on it. I don't think this is even remotely close in terms of that matchup.
I love it. All right, last thing. Look, we've talked about Ryan Gauld and Brian White, obviously. I don't want to forget. Well, let's just talk about this. Who else besides those big names that we've already talked about? And the reason why I ask, they've got 10 players who have played over 2,400 minutes for them this season. But in terms of goal scoring, look, Fafa Pikal is like this MLS veteran who just signs with a team year after year, puts in great shifts, gets 5, 6, 8, in this case, over 45 matches, 10 goals, and 8 assists, by the way, with Vancouver this season. Is there another player who maybe comes out and plays well against LAFC and makes it a little bit more difficult?
No, I don't think so. I think up and down the roster, we have better quality all the way through. And so it's really just a matter of our guys winning their battles. I will put out there, I think that this is one of those matches that Giroud should have really favorable matchups against, Blackman and Vissel Novik. Like this is I do think their center back position is a weaker one. They have a pretty good midfield and their attack is pretty good, but I think their back line, they're well disciplined, but that's where we can exploit by quality. And, fortunately, unfortunately, I think Giroud is going to have to be the answer for that. I don't know if he will be, and I think that's somewhere it mucks it up. But if he can dominate those center backs, he could feast, and I'd love to see it. I haven't seen him. None of us have seen him feast, but this game is one that screams for it.
I would love for that to be the case. Luke, what do you think? Is there anybody that makes it a little more interesting for us?
Well, look, anytime I see Ryan Raposo going out onto the pitch, I just get mad because he makes me mad. He's just one of these people just like, oh, and I will never forget a few years back where he committed a foul that absolutely should have been a red card. Absolutely was like night and day red card, and they just gave him a yellow, and he got away with it. And every time he's out on the pitch against us, he's just flying around committing fouls left and right, and I can't stand the guy. And you brought up Fafa Pico. Fafa is one of those guys who gives us fits. So I think he has absolutely the ability to make it difficult for us.
Yeah, I want to throw out one other name. They just got him back from the Colombian First Division. He was on loan for a little bit. Deiber Caicedo, who's, he has those moments where you watch him on the pitch and you're like, this guy's pretty good. He maybe should be playing somewhere else. And then he has moments like he's looked for most of his Vancouver Whitecaps career, which is pretty fair to middling at best. I think he could be a player that looks at these playoffs. He's still just 24 years old. He's a left winger who probably isn't going to get a ton of run with obviously Brian White out there as well. But I think maybe this could be his final push into, I really want to get out of MLS and out of Vancouver because I don't know how many Colombians grow up dreaming of playing at BC Place as they're going through the ranks of Colombian soccer. But I think we could maybe see a little something from Deiber Caicedo, but I hope we don't.
And also, don't forget Damir Kreilach as well. That's
Damir Kreilach.
I know.
Yeah, he's a dangerous one.
Let's hope he's not as good once as he ever was, right? Because he's definitely long in the tooth and maybe winding down a very good professional career. But yes, I will not ever forget 2018 and Damir Kreilach with RSL. All right, guys.
Wasn't he a DP then?
Yes, he was their DP.
He's like an MLS 2.0 DP. Nobody's a DP like that anymore.
Definitely is. Let's talk keys to victory. We've said how, at least for a little bit, Vancouver has sort of made LAFC play their game over the last couple of matches. Neither of you seem too concerned about that, but we'll start with Erik. Erik, LAFC best of 3 series against Vancouver. What does LAFC need to do to come out on top?
We just need to play our game, which is, for Vancouver is going to be absorbing pressure. At Dolo Ball at his best, he likes them to suffer a little bit and then spring the quick, rapid counterattacks. Wait for Vancouver to lose their discipline. Wait for Sartini to jump up and down and start getting yellow cards, and that's it. We just need to frustrate them for the first 30, 40 minutes of the game, and at that point they're going to start making mistakes. They're going to start trying to do more than they can, and that's when we exploit them, and that's when we've historically exploited everybody. So I expect to see a clinic of Dolo Ball.
All right, let me ask you the opposite question then. What does Vancouver need to do to really give us fits and to maybe, unfortunately, have them charge all of our credit cards for a third match?
Yeah. Vancouver needs to go out there and play really chippy. I think they need to try to get under the player's skin, and I think the way that they're going to really exploit is on a set piece. I think getting us to give up bad set pieces is something that where they can be dangerous, and I think if they do get an early lead, they can make themselves hard to break down. So I think going down early will make them tougher, and they just need to basically play what I love, which is ugly soccer. If they play ugly ball, I think they can come away and steal it.
All right, Luke, your thoughts on LAFC's keys to victory?
I think, firstly, and this may seem obvious, but as much as possible, mistake-free. That we need to play mistake-free ball, because that is when Vancouver pounces. They've done that to us in the past, where we've just sort of taken our foot off the gas for a little bit and kind of fallen asleep a little bit, and they just jump. So, and Gold and White will do that in a flash. So for me, that's the first one. The second one for me is stay healthy, because I get very, very nervous going to play on that concrete in Vancouver, that any one of our guys could go down with something that is going to have them out, especially if it were to go to a third game and then we're down a key player. I don't want that. So I know that may not sound the most exciting as far as how we win, but I want us to stay healthy. So focus on what we can do without overextending in such a way that they end up potentially taking a season-ending injury.
Yeah, I mean, Eric, you mentioned Colorado being without Georgi Mihailovic. And look, we all see what's going on right now over in Carson.
It's not cute.
I turned it off when it was 3. I'm like, I don't need to watch this anymore.
4 now. They just scored again. So we can't have any injuries. Look, I want to give you the chance, though, Luke, to answer. Okay, so what does Vancouver have to do to really make it difficult for LAFC?
They got to find some way to bottle up Denny, because if they can't bottle up Denny, that he is hungry. We have seen Denny ready and rip-roaring to score goals these last few games, and I think if they don't find a way to bottle up, he's going to score 2-3 easy.
I love it. All right, so my thoughts real quick. For LAFC, in order for us to do what we've been doing against Vancouver now for most of the last 2 years, for me, the first thing is to close out space. I feel like if we give Ryan Gauld or Stuart Armstrong any extra space to create, then I think that's where Vancouver can catch us. Maybe it's Eddie Segura ball watching or somebody over-rotating, and now the switch kind of kills us just a little bit. I think that as long as we close out the space, whether that's the midfielders doing it, whether that's players like maybe Denis dropping back and helping out to defend as well, or obviously our back line that has been so incredibly strong, as long as we close out space, we'll be fine. And the other thing I think that's necessary for LAFC to do early is to finish the chances that we create. I think we also can at times make the game more difficult on ourselves by not finishing some of these chances. It was, I think, what we were ruining at the beginning of the season, right? Where it was maybe a couple of chances from Denis and a couple of chances from Maddie and a couple of chances from Kike. And we were kind of looking at it like, God, are these guys just snake bit this season? Turns out we figured it out. We scored plenty of goals this season. I just don't want us to get back into the habit of maybe not finishing those chances. And for Vancouver, I think they're just going to need to look, 90 minutes on any given day can cause some havoc. but I think it will all come down to the pieces that we would least expect, whether it's a Stuart Armstrong or whether it's a Daber Caicedo or some of these other guys that we don't have that much tape on against LAFC or in Major League Soccer this year. Those could be maybe the X factor guys, the key guys that do something that, that could cause the game to get a little haywire for us. And I think the other thing is we just need to stay away from the strange, the weird, the odd play, the ball that pops up in the box and catches an elbow, or a silly yellow or red card foul in the middle of the pitch in the 42nd minute. One of those things where you look back and you're like, God, that was just so unnecessary or so out of the blue where something like that happens. I do think that's maybe the only way that Vancouver stays in it once we get a lead. And I would agree. If we give up one to them, they're pretty good at shutting it down, playing a low block, and parking buses for 25, 30, 40, 50 minutes at a time. So we'll see. All right. Last thing, you guys, what we love to do is talk about our score predictions. And let's talk about just the home match. We can just do the first match if you'd like. And I'm going to go with Luke. Luke, your score prediction in match number 1 of what we hope is only 2 against Vancouver.
Right. Well, I think it's going to be 3-1. I see it being a 1-1 at half, and then us coming through with a couple of good ones in middle of the second half to hold on and take that one home game 3-1.
I like it. 3-1. All right. Erik?
I think it's going to be a 4-0 LAFC.
Woo! Wow. Erik coming big swings. I like it. I think this one is going to be a showcase of LAFC's offensive prowess, but I do think it's going to be more interesting than we think. I think it is actually going to be 4-2 in this one. I think it's going to be a lot of goals scored. One of our buddies, Genuine Cougar in the chat, always likes to talk about betting lines and everything. Whatever the over is, hypothetically, if you are into that type of thing, I might suggest, hypothetically, that you take the over on this one. It's going to be a lot of fun. And a reminder, everybody, aggregate doesn't matter. Nothing matters other than wins and losses, because it's America and that's how we do our soccer here. It's absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, it's just wins and losses. Aggregate doesn't matter. It's a hot mess. I hate this best of 3 so much, but whatever.
It's so dumb. It's dumb.
It's MLS at its finest. That's for sure. All right, you guys, this has been, I'm so bummed. Philly has been at the combine. He was in a presentation with the MASL commissioners. It's not like Philly's blowing us off. He's doing some really cool stuff at the MASL combine. Would have absolutely loved to have Philly on so he could talk more about Vancouver. He's really enjoyed doing that several times this season. But Philly, we missed you. Also, to all the other pods out there, we know Happyfoot, Sadfoot really wanted to be here. They couldn't make it, unfortunately. Had some stuff go on with their schedules. They're busy. But Bam is in the chat right now from Heart of LAFC. We reached out to Joseph and everybody at Heart. We love
things to do on a Saturday night other than like sit around and do a podcast.
I don't know what you're talking about, but
I believe for Bam, it's actually Sunday afternoon. So
yeah.
I mean,
it's already next Wednesday for Bam in Australia. We've already played all 3 legs of this if it's going that far at that point. So, Bam, we love you. You guys, we love all of you in the chat. Again, real quick, before we sign off, we have been extremely lucky to have both Luke and Erik here. Luke, where can everybody find you on social media? Give us another quick little bio of yourself and everything and how we can keep track of what's going on.
Sure. I'm on Instagram at LAFC.Luke. That's where you can find me on social. And I'm the president of the Pride Republic, going on now my 2nd year, and also part of LGBTFC podcast. Folks can find on all the socials at LGBT_FC pod.
Yeah, and look, you can even look up the one where Scarf was a guest on LGBTFC.
That's right.
That was so much fun. And Erik, where can everybody find you on social media?
You can find me, Erik Hultstrom, at Twitter, where I have no shortage of spicy hot takes about many sports-related things, mostly LAFC. And occasionally I write for Territorious MLS, which is a Brazilian/MLS site.
And how many of those pieces are about Eduardo Atuesta? I'm just curious.
I've actually I don't think I've ever wrote a piece about Atuesta. So
All right. Well, now you have your homework for the offseason. Tell Palmeiras why they should take back Edward Atuesta. We'll see.
Oh man, if you can take like the biggest hater on LAFC for him, and they're not going to be anywhere near like the average hater on Palmeiras. Like their sports media is on just like their exhibitions before matches and their fans. It's a whole other like galaxy that's on. It's crazy the level of passion they have down there, and their level of passion against him is pretty cringy.
Yeah, I know that was an interesting whole scenario there. You guys, thank you so much to Luke. Thank you to Erik. Philly, we missed you, buddy. Hopefully, Philly will be getting some sleep. I know he's unfortunately going to miss the game tomorrow as well, but I'll be there. You guys, if you see me or any of these fine gentlemen around BMO Stadium, make sure you say hi, make sure you say what's up. And thank you all, defenders of the bank. We absolutely love everybody in the chat. And again, however you find us on social media, thank you. This has been a much longer and much more fun One More Sleep. Who would have thought we could make Vancouver fun, but we did it. You guys, thank you again. Check out my friends on social media. And that's it, guys. Bye-bye.